Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our meeting this morning, and welcome to Matthew from staff who's joining us this morning, and also some consultants tied in with our decisions today. So, greetings. We have a problem with our live stream this morning, so the meeting is being recorded and will be put up and posted online afterwards. Right, so we'll start off with our apologies and leave of absence. I think we've got Sarah Jane online. Good morning, Sarah Jane, and Sarah's here, so we're all here. So that's good to go. Any notification of urgent business? Any declarations of interest today? Right, we'll move on to number 5, the confirmation of our minutes from the 7th of May.
I'm happy to make.
Caleb, moved Caleb, seconded. Dane, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. No public forum this morning, so we're straight into our agenda items. So our first one up is item 7.1, our adoption of development contributions, 26. So recall when we were doing our fees and charges earlier in the month, these numbers weren't good for us. So hence we're making the decision today. And good morning, Lania.
Chair, morning, so presenting here the development contributions for 2025-26. So capital updates its DCs annually to include any increase in the producer price index, and they're structured in line with the development contributions policy. 3 things to note. You would have received yesterday an updated schedule with some minor updates to the figures due to error in the calculations. Secondly, this morning we've also uploaded the actual calculations spreadsheet into Teams for your information. And thirdly, just to note that in the resolution, rather than saying that we adopt the development contributions, we're changing that to say development and financial contributions, because that more accurately reflects what's in the schedule. Any questions?
Right. Yes, Kevin.
Why is that different in each town?
So if you remember when we developed the development contribution policy, what we do is we look at the capital growth projects that we've got planned ahead in each town, and we can only calculate our fees based on the actual projects that we've got lined up for those towns into the, I think it's a 10-year period. So you'll see, for example, the contributions in Te Araha are very low, and that's because we haven't got any development projects planned. We had very few development projects planned for Te Araha in 10 years.
There's also, if I can just comment, there was also a move, what company was this policy or the previous review, that there needed to be, you couldn't do it across the district. You had to do it within definable areas. We went down to what we thought was an appropriate definable area, which was down to a ward. So that's evolved since these development contributions first were introduced. We took a wider view. Now we've gone down to a more catchment view. So that's a if you like, a not a kind of a legal development that's occurred as these development contributions have been challenged over time. And effectively it goes back to what Lania was saying, that if you're going to charge development contributions, you've got to have a basis for it. The basis is the capital works proposed and the growth component of the capital works, and it needs to be over a reasonable area, which in our case we've determined as our wards or our main towns. So it's not really, council hasn't changed any policy per se. That's been an evolved. That's how the legal aspects of this have evolved over time. Whereas for financial contributions, which is the Parks and Reserves one, that is that is a different legislation, not controlled by those same drivers.
More requirement for roading means they pay more.
And in the development catchment that you've identified. Okay, so yes, if you've got more, so as Lania pointed out, not a lot of growth projects, very few growth projects in our last review for the Te Alaha area for water and wastewater. So those levies are low relative to the others. So if you take the Matamata wastewater treatment plant upgrade, for example, which is largely driven by standard compliance, but has an element of growth, that is distinctive to Te Alaha's situation. And so, as I said before, we have to relate the development contributions to what I call a reasonable catchment, hence the different fees.
Because some of them are quite different. You know,
Yeah. I mean, Matamata water, for example, goes from
Yeah.
66 in 2021-24 to 359. That's a dramatic reduction, for example.
yes.
But when we pay rates, targeted rates, we all pay the same.
So the process,
I know DC's targeted rates are a bit different, but
you're right. So there's a very prescribed process around development contributions to justify development contributions. So in that, and I'm not expecting any of you to have gone back and looked at this, but when we adopted development contributions policy for this long-term plan, associated with that policy were the capital works that qualified or had elements of growth in them by the catchment area. So if you go back and have a look at, for example, Matamata wastewater treatment plant, you'll see $40 million at that point worth of capital in there, of which only a small portion of that was growth related. That contributed to the development contribution that we established. We've been running development contributions, and when did we first introduce them? I'm trying to think how many, probably 4 or 5, 15 years, say. What we've seen happen in that time is because we did try to standardize initially. In fact, we did standardize on almost on a functional basis. As I say, as time has evolved, the need to ensure that we are capturing information at an appropriate catchment level has driven this change. Now, if development contributions are still applicable for the next long-term plan, the numbers will be plugged in based on the capital schedule, and we'll see changes again. So it's a very prescribed formula. I just want to emphasize that what today is about we're not relitigating that. We're actually talking about how much the indexing of it by an appropriate mechanism.
it's the impact on what we have to spend caused by the development that's happening at that water.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes. By the way, we could have gone down to a lot smaller catchment area. We could have, in theory, but that would have been very problematic for us practically.
Any further questions, clarification? I guess the understanding here is that these numbers align with what's in our long-term planning, and yes, Caleb.
So if everyone else is content and not asking any further questions, I'd be happy to one, move that one, the report is received, and that two, the council adopt the development contributions updated to include any increase in the PPI for 25-26 to apply from the 1st of July 2025.
Thank you, Caleb. So we have a mover. Can I have a second, please?
Just a clarification, just that development and financial
Yes.
conditions.
Okay, so that needs to be put into the development. Okay, so we have an addition here that obviously adopt the development of financial contributions, and that, and number 3, the council authorised staff to make minor amendments for clarification purposes. So you're happy with that? Thank you. And James, you indicated you second. You have a question?
Yes, can I just took a little while
Sure,
for it to.
that's all right, yeah.
to mull in that in my head. How are these charges likely to impact developments on Papakainga? Will there be any difference given the difference in development of Papakainga versus a regular development charges?
Do you want to answer? So All development that occurs within a defined catchment will pay the development contribution on the same basis. The issue that is in front of us actually is a potential change in legislation away from development contributions to a different mechanism, which will be, as I understand it, even more standardised. So it all depends when the development occurs as to what the impact will be. But if you're in a catchment and you've got a development and you receive the service, that's the other critical element. So all properties receive the roading development contribution. But if a public housing development is not connected to a council supply, it won't be affected by, it won't get attracted development contribution.
Same as any other development.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's where the roading and the reserves come into it.
I do think public housing is clearly noted as an exemption or something in the policy.
Yeah.
There is a statement there about public.
It's not a catch-all if you don't receive the services, yeah. Right, well, we'll put the motion that Caleb has moved and Jane Stainsbury has seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Carried. Right, item 7.2, the Matamata wastewater treatment plant upgrade project and the budget increase. Ray. Fiona and Ray handling this project. And just noting that I think we all appreciated the site visit the other day, going out to the Matamata treatment plant. I think it really gave us nothing like standing on the spot and seeing what the environment is to then consider this decision. Thank you.
Morning. So, Morena. So take the report as read, but open to any questions that anyone has or follow-up questions from the site visit that we had last week.
Site visit was very helpful.
Yeah.
And your full, which right on soon, please.
I was just a
Well, I guess I will back up what Sue was saying. I thought it was very helpful. I certainly had some questions, particularly around how much solid matter had to come out of the ponds and how the contractors could have misread that. But your explanation of that, I guess, while I'm comfortable with having the budget go a bit awry, it's definitely made the whole situation a little bit more reasonable for me. So. Yeah, kind of is what it is.
Yeah, and it's noting how old those ponds are. So there's a lot of, stuff that's landed in the bottom that's compacted quite, over time. Bruce. Yeah.
On page 13, under the risk, it talks about wetland budget held within the 41.5 million stage 2 envelope. And yet there's effectively a PC sum in here that constructed wetland discharge 2.5 million in the 67.
We're holding 2.5 million for the wetland.
Sorry?
We're holding 2.5 million within the budget for the wetland works because we're still working through a final design and consenting. We've got a design, but we're still going through the consenting of it. So we just need to make sure that the design stands, and then we'll have it formally priced as a variation to the contract.
But isn't that a double dipping? Because you've got 41.5. It says it's in the 41.5. Right. So wetland budget held within the 41.5 million stage 2.
Yes. It's separate item.
It's then up in the one above.
The 41.5 is as I understand it correctly,
what you're saying.
it's the tender the tender price submitted for the build with agreed variations.
Yeah.
And the wetlands is a separate element because it still has to be designed and agreed, etc. Is that?
I didn't read right.
No.
It doesn't read right. You're right. Correct.
You're right.
But it makes sense that it would be separate.
It is, yeah, I believe the risk table is incorrect. Yep. Apologies for that. I see what you mean. It looks, yeah, it says that we've got it twice within the 41 and then within Howard as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're holding it outside until, because
I just wondered
we need to
where that was
consent
going.
it and being able to build it within that building contract.
Yeah.
That is the plan. The plan is to build it with the contractor who we've got on site.
Yeah.
There's just a few steps to go through yet before we can formally give them that piece of work within the contract.
Oh, that's good question for clarification. Well picked up. I guess we only for the sake of correctness is incremental weather. I presume it meant inclement weather.
Yeah.
Just you're testing that we're reading it, and we are.
Weather gets worse, so that we go.
Yeah, it's incremental. Yeah. No, that's all good. Are there any other questions? Like I think, yes, Peter.
I couldn't make this the other day, so apologies for that. Just related to this new plant, this, the existing ponds out there. They're full of sludge, yeah, which is going to come out and be treated and gone away. In years to come, what's going to happen to those ponds? Are they just going to sit there? Are there going to be millions of dollars worth of cost to get rid of them because somebody says we have to? What's the long term, for those things?
So Marie's alluded to this in the report, that's actually that whole decommissioning, etc. of the residual area has to be a specific project. I'll let Marie talk to that because there are a number of options, Fiona, and there are a number of options of how, but the reality is it has to be dealt with. As to what it finally will be, the options will determine. I'll let Marie and Fiona comment on that.
Yeah, so we need to work through a long-term strategy of what the site looks like as a whole, both the ponds and the remaining area that we've got. There's the UF plant and there's other areas within the plant as well. So we need to come up with a long-term strategy of what that looks like. As part of the comprehensive consent process we've been going through, we've got the Mana Whenua working group, and they've already suggested they've got interest in being a part of that long-term strategy and understanding what that looks like. Probably reading between those lines, there's a desire to have the site replanted or moving towards that. From, I guess, an operational or a council perspective, being able to utilise those lined ponds as a monofill or somewhere you could store sludge potentially and then cap and grow on top of as a potential. There's lots of different options of what you can do. We haven't started that journey yet. So there's a little bit to go, but you are right. There is going to be a decent budget that is required to decommission and then set that site up for long-term use. What you can use it for is fairly limited. It's a hail site. You won't ever get away from that. So it's quite restricted on what we will be able to do with it. But we do need to come up with that plan in the next little while.
And I guess the reclamation of one of the ponds to build on is part of that usage of that hail site at the end of the day. That we weren't increasing our footprint by putting a new plant next to it, that we're actually maintaining a footprint.
Yeah, whilst it makes it a bit of a juggle game in terms of compliance for the next couple of years as we do it, it is a good use of utilising land that has already been degraded for wastewater services and making the most of them.
Yeah.
Just looking to the future, I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a lot more than it was going to be. And I sort of compare it with, the stadium at Matamata, those 6 stadiums. I can visualise that and I can see $60 million there, but it seems $60 million in a wastewater thing. It is what it is. Longevity, how long is it going to, provide Matamata's needs?
Yeah, so the plant is designed in 2 stages. So we are building the first stage, which will take our growth through to around 2050, 2060, I believe. But then there's also got the allowance for being added onto. So we're making space where you can add another bioreactor area and you can add your membranes on. So it's easy to kind of, I guess you leave the space and you have the pipe there, then you come and click on your next processes as you need them in the future. In terms of the concrete structure, so I have a 100-year design now and sizing. So yeah, we are talking about a long-term asset, I guess, for the Matamata community in terms of ensuring
It takes 35 years.
The consent was 35 years is what we saw.
So I guess if the ponds are built in the 50s or whenever, like they've served us well, and hence the need now to renew. And the other towns have had theirs done in the last 20 odd years. So I guess that's the thing. It's that progress into that next stage, and obviously with our resource consent rolling off. Because where's that at with our consent?
So we currently have that. So the consent was applied for over a year ago, and we were notified around October last year. It's now sitting with council, and I'm actually speaking with the executive team in the coming weeks regarding whether we're going to proceed with that consent application or look at the new wastewater standards that have come in. And so obviously comparing those against each other, we're in a position where we could proceed with either way because the consent application as it stands was publicly notified. So it's a valid application. So it's really going to come down to a decision here on which way we choose to proceed, which comes with lots of different risks and scenarios that needs to be considered. Yeah, and for different plants, there's potentially different outcomes, but we're just working through that at a staffing level at the moment to have a recommendation to take to executive and then from there to council.
Thanks for that update.
I was just going to say off the back of your question, Peter, I think some of the extension in the budget is because there was a couple of items we heard about last week that have been upsized as well. Not all to do with, budgets going over. It's an increased amount of to be able to deal with some of the scope for a long period for as well.
Yeah, we've just increased the size of several of the process units due to the flow that we're seeing coming into the plant and the loadings into the plant. So also the strength of the wastewater we're seeing is higher than it was back in 22 when we did the initial assessment of costs. And I think another point we made at the time was that cost in 22 and it was set was plus or minus 35%. It was really rough order to get into the long-term plan. And so as you work through defining those that detailed design and confirming sizing and all of that, then you do end up with a lot closer budget. Yeah. Our final engineer's estimate and where our tender landed were very aligned.
Hey, Bruce.
Couple of one. I just asked myself why a PC sum for the decommissioning wasn't included in the overall project.
Good question.
From an LTP position.
What I can appreciate now is two things. I didn't appreciate at the time the 22 estimate was plus or minus 35%, because if it had been, I probably would have been more risk averse than the estimate I put in the long-term plan. And I think the other indication about that is talking about the options. Putting numbers in, particularly for a work of this scale and the follow-on work, I think we need to have a good lens over that, and because the numbers can just seem to vary so much. So I think what's been happening in the last couple of years is the team's been looking at the strategy. The team have known this is coming. It's just a question of when have we got the numbers to be able to start firming down onto the option and critically put the numbers in the long-term plan. And so, yeah, as I say, my lesson
it's not there, is it?
Not to the, well, we've made some provision for desludging, but it's, look, to be honest, I think the owners often said to us these numbers are going to be potentially quite big, and my lesson for me is get some more certainty around those numbers, understand the risk around those numbers before we put them in the next plan. So the timetable, I think it'll be the 27-28 LTP that the timing would fit for us to put, because I think the commissioning of the plant is 27 from memory.
Yeah.
So that it works that way. The challenge we have, I guess, right now is what we put in the water services delivery plan, and I'd like to have seen a little bit more of visibility of those options to at least make a reasonable provision in there.
And lastly, going back to the DCs, the DCs are based on what's been in the and your split between replacement and growth. If there was a large development put through a fast track that put 500-600 houses into place, what provision is there for the 67 million being reapportioned from a growth to for growth, so that there is some ability to suck some of it back in development contributions?
So just note that I've made reference to the fact that development levies will change. If that goes through, and legislation will actually change this picture completely. We will no longer have a development contribution policy. However, if we were preparing the next long-term plan, still with our water and wastewater services included in it, what we would do is we would go back to our numbers in the development contribution capital we'd re-input the numbers that we now know into that policy, which would recalculate the development contributions. We would revisit the growth component of that if there was a need to change that, and we would plug that in. That's a normal process. You can do that. You do that every 3 years, normal process. The one comment I'd say about, say, a fast track application versus where we had growth sales predicted, our view is it's not, the fast track application is not going to change the growth profile. The growth profile will be what it will be. It just so happens that it might be occurring somewhere that we hadn't necessarily planned for it. What might flow from that, what we are trying to do with a fast track application, or we've tried to do, is make sure any growth impacts that that development imposes beyond what we've allowed for is captured in the development levy on that development. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, the ability is there.
So just a last question probably. Is this a no surprises, 67?
Yes, but we have, that's why we're ration out, like, see what is still unknown. So we have, as you've seen, reduced that contingency value down quite substantially from where we had it initially. And that is because we've locked in a lot of the unknowns. We've done the groundwork, we have procured our long lead items, we have a main civil works contract number. So we've taken a lot of that risk out. There are still risks. We've got an 18 to 24 month contract build. We're going through 2 winters. If we have wet winters, then there is a chance that that budget will come back. So there would be, yeah. So I mean, there does still remain those unknowns. We've got a couple of principal supplied items. That means that council has purchased those items and we need to pre-issue them to the contractor on time to ensure we don't delay their program. Any delays with that would result in a cost to us for them not arriving on time. We've got those contracts in place and we've got those dates locked in and we're working with the contractor and their program on that. But there are those risks that are almost slightly outside of our control, but we can't take away the fact that they are there and they would come at a cost to council if they were to eventuate beyond a portion that was beyond the contingency we're holding. Yeah.
Right. So would you be happy to make a recommendation, Sue?
Yes.
That the information be received, that the council approve a revised budget of $67,050,000 for Matamata wastewater treatment plant upgrade project. And so who's moved it? Seconded Kevin. Kevin, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. That's piece of work. Right, now item 7.3, we have Louisa with the MPDC response to the waste legislation amendment. Good morning, Louisa. Piako, of course.
Morena, yes, I'm sorry for the late delivery of the document. I'll make the point that I've prepared the response based on the view of the waste sector. The view of the elected officials may be different. Okay. And I based that on the cabinet papers that have been released, but a final set of documents were released at 5 o'clock on Friday night, and they confirmed my decision and why I'd made those choices. So I think that maybe the best way forward is for you to ask me questions so I can provide further explanation. There is a risk. It is the intent of this government to change the Waste Minimisation Act to reflect the National Party blue-green blueprint for a better future, and that the funds will be extended to freshwater, biodiversity, climate change, ocean, and possibly waste. The minister has accepted that the option that she has prepared is probably not the preferred option for everybody else and is likely to diminish focus on waste-related projects. So I'll just make that as a point and maybe fine and give you some feedback.
Yeah, it's an interesting piece of work, isn't it? And I guess the challenge for us is that those that create the waste pay for the waste. So it's our packaging is our biggest issue in this country, and construction waste is quite large. So how do we pay for it? How do we recycle it without filling our landfills so quickly, and have initiatives that can divert? That's probably the key, isn't it? Is the sustainable initiatives that are going to divert waste, reusable waste to land from landfill.
Yeah, well, it's actually quite complicated because the extension also allows a TA to use their waste levy funds for landfill remediation, which may mean that they've already done that in the central government part of the act last year, which was the first time they changed it. They set us up for this change, and this has come as a last minute quite a bit of a shock, which means that if you are a TA and you have a contaminated site, typically you apply for the central fund and you get that money. It also includes emergency waste. That may mean that if you're in that situation and you do have a contaminated site and you do have an emergency, you won't be able to apply for a central agency for that funding. You'll have to fund it yourself. Okay. And I think we need to understand that the cost of the cleanup in Hawke's Bay has exceeded 100 million and 2 years later still isn't over. So that is the risk. Okay. And when you include the other trick question in there is biodiversity, because biodiversity for some councils covered wildlands high. So it's quite extensive, the broadening of the scope of the use of the levy.
So I guess that at the end of the day, the council will be applying to, whatever they agree to use their part of the portion of the fund for will be that's where it sits with us, or will it sit with the government that they approve what you need to spend it?
Yes, they will, and they accept that there's going to be additional complexity around how they're going to measure the outcomes. It allows them to require you to fund an activity or not at the discretion of the minister. And it will change the status quo of reporting requirements. It's actually quite complicated. The point that I will make is they're using this very short consultation period to gain some feedback. A lot of people answer yes to a question. It's a trick question because I've been with some of our neighbouring TAs and they haven't really looked at the mountain of paperwork you have to review and analyse before you actually understand what is happening. They're then going to draft the scope of the levy in September, and then they'll put it out again for consultation. So we will have the second time to make a comment. Okay, this is just perceiving that the government and legal have acknowledged there are risks. It is effectively changing it to a tax, although they've got some wording around it, which won't take important.
Oh, thanks for that clarity. Any further questions for Louisa?
You can include tyres. Tyres part of that waste.
Tyres have already got a.
So that step completed.
Well, what they'll do is they are intending to change the amount funded based on population. So let's say there's $100 million a year. The first 20 million will be divided up evenly, and the rest will be based on population. So we will potentially get a small increase. So we'll still be around about $1 million a year, but you'll have to fund everything.
But you're asking specifically about tyres. So
tyres. Yeah, well, tyres,
product stewardship scheme.
it's EPR, and that's the reason why they're trying to change the EPR. We actually support that. It
Can you
does
say what EPR is just to
Protection.
EPR?
Producer responsibility.
It's extended producer
Yeah.
responsibility. So it's those who create it have to deal with it. So you're trying to, it's the old story with product stewardship. You're charged it when you purchase the tyre for its disposal or recycling, whatever happens to it. It's the same in the farming sector with egg recovery and what I used to do with chemical containers and drums. It's exactly the same thing. Yeah.
So who's responsible for it? Like
when you buy
with the mountains of tyres that are around the place, who's responsible for getting rid of them?
Well, in actual fact, to date, the Tyreways scheme has been successful from our point of view.
Yeah.
They are looking to change the legislation because they haven't got the funding mechanism quite right, which means that to change it, they have to go back to consultation. This change is correct. That means they'll be able to get it, but they'll say it's not $5, it's 10. Okay. Benefit for us has been, we probably saved about $15,000 having the tyres that we were transporting on somewhere else at ratepayers' cost. Okay? And we get $100 a month back for having them on the site. Okay? I've spoken to the litter people. They've seen far fewer tyres dumped around the area, so they're very happy about that. That has an out.
Farmers can only deal with a certain amount of.
Yeah. So we get charged. So whenever you buy a tyre, you're being paying for it to be disposed of.
Yeah,
There are a number of plants around New Zealand that strip out the wire and do various things.
I was going to say, we I vaguely remember it may have been the first time we were on it.
Yeah.
We got a
Proposal.
proposal that came with it. They were going to instant freeze tyres or something and then crack them all over.
Yeah, no, that hasn't.
That doesn't happen.
developed. Yeah.
Most of them get chipped up and sent to Metro and Fine Array.
North Island, they get chopped up and put in the roads.
Yeah. Anyway, oh, sorry, Caleb.
Yeah, the benefit of producer responsibility and EPR is if there is a area, for example, we can't do anymore, it's over to them to find another solution. But it's been a real benefit for us, and I understand our mayor will have experienced the frustration. It's been 15 years and still egg recovery isn't overnight. Okay? So we were starting to make progress and now it's all going back. Yes.
Caleb.
No question, but I have to commend your patience in dealing with all of this. And I just want to say we're very, very fortunate to have such an intelligent person doing what you're doing.
It's your experience.
And I have a lot of confidence that you're going to do well with this. So I'm happy to know the information we received. And we go with 2A and 3.
I'll just make one final comment. The litter regulations are actually very good. We don't know what the fines will be, but we will be able to use number plate recognition to send out fines. It will speed it up and make it far easier to deal with people that are not behaving very well.
Where's our cameras?
Well, we had a recent example where someone was dumping in one of our reserves. They saw the car, they saw the vehicle.
That's right.
Someone can snap that number plate, go bang, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not our cameras.
It's not our camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Because I know we haven't got to.
Yeah, our community are our eyes and ears. Yeah. So the reality is, as a community, are our eyes and ears when people dump stuff, right? And then of course we can respond. And if there's even in the rubbish, there's some identifying stuff, well then you've got traceability. It's accountability to people that are doing the wrong thing, and that's what the litter act's about. It's having not sitting in with a wet bus ticket or just letting it happen. Because the challenge we have is KBS go and pick it up, and there's just no ramifications. The ratepayer pays. This is the whole point of the litter act, and being able to action a bit of those, the bit of the stick rather than in the past.
Yes, we hope that's the case. I will say that on a couple of webinars, some of our councils have issued like 150 fines and 6 have been paid.
Yeah, that's the challenge. Right, so Caleb has offered to move the information we received and that we approve the table to submission and that the mayor be authorised to sign the submission. Bruce, you're happy to second that? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Next item is 7.4, the new private access way to be made on Washbourne Road.
I don't, but I guess. So.
Yeah. Good morning, Barry.
Morning, everybody. So this is should be a pretty straightforward one, rural private access way. I just want to acknowledge the support from the Rochelle and the roading team and also the contractor who provides the road numbering. So we kind of did this back to the alternative way to what we normally do it. So we had to get advice as to how we prepare the numbering before we could actually name the road. So you can see on the diagram there's a couple of legs to this, so it wasn't as straightforward as some of the early ones. So and also the consultant was very easy to deal with, made for a good result. So
Excellent. Good to hear. Any feedback, any comment? Okay, so Sue's moving that we approve the private access way name, Marion Lane, the 6 lot rural residential subdivision. All right, Senda Russell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Barry. Thanks for these explanations. Obviously, wasn't it just a simple exercise? You
No.
had to go through.
Yeah.
And nice that you got a good outcome, that you all worked together and got it over the line.
Thank you.
Next item, 7.5, Mark Norris presenting the local members reserve about with kindergartners, 20 Rushton Road.
Good morning, Madam Chair and councillors. I take the report as read. I just wanted to briefly highlight something before you get into discussions. I know the recommendations may seem a bit all over the place. I do have a bit of a cheat sheet for which recommendations to consider depending on your decision. Essentially, there are 3 basic options. Option 1 is the status quo, which is always an option, which would be to let the lease run its course for now and deal with the issues later. Option 2 would be to agree to a longer lease term within what the Act allows. And option 3 would be to declare the land surplus and initiate the reserve revocation consultation process. Depending which option you choose, when we come back to the recommendations, there'll be certain things that will strike out straight away, which should make things simpler.
So, you're familiar with the site?
I'm not, so.
Yeah, Bruce, you've got any
Oh, well, I've got
questions to
a
ask?
few questions.
Yeah.
How do we set the rental?
Rental quite generous.
Oh, I don't know. No, I just, I won't comment on that. I just, how do we set the rental?
So some of these historic ones, I honestly don't know how they were set.
But it would only be historic from at the start.
Yeah.
Yes. So till about 2 years ago, there was no policy as such. We now have a community group leases and licenses policy, which defines who community groups are and various activities. Generally, they get a peppercorn lease, and it's usually because of the benefit that the activity provides to the community. There's a bit of a policy vacuum with commercial leases that is on the to-do list. They're generally dealt with by council on a case-to-case basis, and there's usually a bit of work that
It's
goes.
almost a commercial lease.
So I don't know
Exactly.
when the original lease was set up, what the formula was.
Right, no, okay, no, just again, was it $150 or something? I thought, oh yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. Hey, do they pay rates?
I believe they do.
Right. No.
They probably get a remission though, I think, because they're an educational institute. So they have minimal.
Yeah,
Water, if they get rubbish, sewer, they pay those rates.
I think from my point of view, we've got to be more commercial and cost effective on some of their leases and what have you. So that's just my own personal view. I'm not in favour of a closed. If we thought it was to be sold, that it would be on a closed tender, and definitely that tender would be not necessarily accepted type of thing. This is a reserve which has served its purpose since in the 1980s or whatever. I don't see any reason for it not to continue as a reserve and as a lease. And I would say if they want to increase the length of the term, it's probably to give them more surety of what they want to do themselves. So I don't have a problem with that. I would be saying, well, but if you want it, you're going to pay the cost of those, those legal things. We should be being more commercial, right? So that's my thoughts at this stage.
So it's currently reserve line zoning is residential. So if we remove the reserve status, it becomes residential. Does that have to change for the school to then be able to stay?
It would have existing use rights as it currently is, if it was residential, because it's been operating since the mid-80s as a kindergarten. But if it were to be expanded, developed further, it eventually would be resource.
Okay, so I hear what Bruce is saying about he is not necessarily been accepted. So would we get it valued and offer it to them at a price, or
we've set precedent a little bit in that way in terms of St John's. I mean, we basically valued the land and offered to them at that price.
Yeah.
So I would presume, never presume, that would be the case if we deem the surplus. And it's interesting because I mean they want surety of, and I guess you're getting busier with obviously Lockerbie getting busier. And I know Lockerbie does have a daycare thing around. Oh God, I'm not sure whether that's complementary or competitive. I'm not quite sure. But it's kind of interesting though, because I mean, you look at that and you kind of they're the ones coming to us wishing to purchase. Yeah, I mean it's really unlikely that we'll do anything with that land. But if we gave them a 25 or 33-year lease, I mean,
putting off the inevitable?
We are putting it off, and then we've got the other that lot 50 beside it, which is only 68 square meters. But I mean, potentially, that could be say a windfall for council. But we've got two areas in the facility. If I would be in favour of if we don't need it because we obviously haven't used it for the reserve.
So I would be in favour of putting it out there with the price and seeing what they come up.
I'd like to see what our valuation
Yeah,
those exactly are. I mean, they're talking about there's
what's 2,000 square meters residential section.
Mark can probably answer some questions here.
Just wanted to remind council that this particular property is not held in fee simple without any reserve status. It is actually held under the Reserves Act, so we do have to follow the prescribed disposal process. But it's a little bit different from if we had a freehold property that's not a park or reserve, which you could dispose of however you see fit. This one just has a little bit more restriction.
Is this a case of wanting more information? Dane?
Yeah, I kind of agree with James a little bit. I mean, it's to do anything else with it is going to probably cause a bit of a community uproar if you're, potentially looking like taking the land out from underneath them. It's been a daycare forever. It's not going to have anything else on it. I think, like I say, I mean, as long as we value it correctly along the same lines as what we did with St John's and offered it to them to do that, I think it's money in council's kitty for something that we're not really getting anything for in the meantime.
It's a reserve that you don't get. That's the money. It has to stay within reserves. That's
sure, but it's still
budget
for something else.
Yeah, we can use it on reserves.
Where they're coming from too is I would imagine that probably the building needs a bunch of maintenance, but when they're getting short-term leases, it's pretty hard to commit to that. And I also know that, you guys, Mark, in Parks and Reserves are probably a little bit overworked and don't need this dropped in your lap. But if we were to go down that track, is there the potential that we can say to them, hey, look, we're giving you a long-term lease, but we can also say that sometime in the not 25-year range, but maybe in the 5 to 10-year range, we will look at, potentially selling this land to you. So they know that they've got a long-term lease, but our long-term vision is to potentially sell it to them after we have it valued and all that sort of thing. So rather than just going one or the other, it's kind of a little bit of a combination of options 2 and 3 out of what you've said, like a long-term view when you guys can get to it, might be to sell it, but in the meantime, here's a lease, you're not being kicked off. You know, you can go and do your building repairs and things and know that we're going to, you know, make it work for you in the future, potentially.
They've got a lease for 2035 anyway, I think. So I think as you try more information, what would it be worth if the reserve status was taken off? How much would it cost to take the reserve status off? Will we actually get enough money out of it in the end to actually recover that cost?
Justify it.
Yeah, but I think it might cover that cost on top of the market value for the property. To the extent. I mean, I had a look at these guys online. They look like 30 or 40 daycare, so it's not like they're.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they're on the bones.
It would give them sure. It would potentially end up with that other little section next door if it was small, so you know, which would be saleable as well. So
The only problem with that, there's a walkway track running right through the middle of that
Yes, so-
section. So I don't think that necessarily that section.
it's 400 and just 400 and what was it? 483 or 63 square meters that section,
Yes.
not including the walkway. So it's still quite a reasonable size
Yeah,
section.
but what I'm saying is that there's a public walkway that would divide those two pieces of land.
Yeah, that's correct.
So
But I mean, the kindergarten, you know, effectively could buy the bit there on,
But
and then the other one is simple, could be used for something else.
so, but it is one reserve. Like, is it divided into two pieces?
Yes, it's actually 3 separate parcels, but they're
Right,
all
so that makes it a bit
reserves with
easier.
different status. Yes.
Yeah,
They want some surety, all right? If you look at their letter or their proposal, I think it tends to we want an extension of the lease to give us some more surety. I think they realise that the sale is probably it was more a will you gift it to as well, all right? So
yeah, I think there'd be no appetite for gifting it.
No, they'd have to pay.
Yeah.
A fair
yes,
The other interesting thing is to go into a hearing. Would we be required to use external commissioners?
It would probably be good practice
Just,
to use the
yes.
independent.
And that's the thing, just to clarify that. Yeah, because it is
Because council would be, I guess, the beneficiary of this.
Yes. it's a conflict.
Do we need then more information in terms of the complexity of the removal of the status and the actual valuation of that land?
I have another question before we go to that point is, Mark, you'd have to handle this, or we'd have to contract it out for somebody to do it?
Yeah.
Because obviously work schedule, just trying to get a complete, understand the capacity and the resourcing from inside the council, because we don't always appreciate the cost of doing additional work.
I suppose the other thing just to mention as well is the time that it takes. Is the time that it takes. I don't know if you recall the Naira Hall disposal process. So we still hadn't. I received an email about that this morning. So that process has been going on for.
Yeah.
However, that one is slightly more complicated because it was Crown land, etc. So that added a bit to the process. But basically, if you declare the land surplus, you have to do a public notice calling for objections, submissions. The wording of the act is a bit archaic, it's still objection. If you receive those, you have to have a hearing. You then have to make your final decision, and your final decision, but then all of that gets packaged up and goes up to the Department of Conservation, and they review the process, make sure the process was compliant. If they're happy with the process and don't have any inquiries that come back, requests for information, if they're happy with it, it goes up to the Minister for Conservation, the delegate to sign,
Convoluted process.
and they then at some point publish the Gazette notice that it's no longer a reserve, and it then becomes a residential section. So that could take easily 2 years
In my comment,
from declaring it surplus to actually being able to dispose of it.
Yeah. So
my comment is, have we spoken to these people or are we going by letter?
There have been a few emails
Or
beforehand.
had we spoken to them?
There
We
have
had to have
been,
a conversation,
there have
because that might solve the problem. If you come to them and say, this property possibly, if we go through the process, might be worth $10 million.
there-
Is that really what you want, or what else do you want? Because that might solve the problem before we start going through a very lengthy process.
there've been several conversations and emails leading up to this. I suppose the thing we don't have is a valuation of the property, what its current market
But you could
value
say to them,
is.
ballparkish, maybe-ish, could be-ish. Are you interested? Is that still of interest to you? Because that might solve the problem. They might be thinking we are going to gift it, we're going to give away $1,000, we'll sell it for $1,000. I'm just saying it might be best to talk to them and see what they're up for. Because for a kindergarten to actually have that sort of funding, it's probably quite rare.
Is it a daycare now and not a kindergarten?
But all the same to me, but you know, those
That's a business. Kindergartens weren't so much a business.
it's all the same to me. Sometimes they don't have that ability to get that money, so maybe we need a
They're
bit
quite franchise these days.
The premises for a closed tender based on market valuation, so that doesn't seem to me to be indicating they want to be gifted it.
Correct.
So a valuation would be useful, definitely, for us to make a decision,
Can we make a ballpark?
and easy to get a valuation.
But the challenge is it's 2 years to do it.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. They have a 5x5x5
There's,
lease.
there's no panic.
Started in 2020.
So shall we, can we make a progress?
Can I suggest that the report be received and council has considered the proposal by Central Kids and resolves to
The investigations.
have staff negotiate with Central Kids on a grant, on a granting of an extension of the lease. And
Leave it at that. for now.
leave it at that.
I don't think they need an extension of these. They have 5x5x5 now.
I don't think it is. I
Started
thought
in
it was like a year at a time.
Goes to, no.
Started in 2020 and they had two of these.
The lease is fine.
It's only, yeah, it's
So
fine.
Goes till
The lease is fine till 2035. So we have like,
I guess the challenge, the challenge with that is that it's 5 years with 2 rights for a which is 15 years total.
Yeah.
When you're talking about doing a building up, it's got more of a life than 15 years. And this is the challenge that they're after, is either we extend the lease and push it out another 15 years on top and make it a 30-year lease, or we just hold the pattern for a moment and just consider the options. Because I don't think we've got ourselves locked into what a clear view we have here around the potential sale of it.
So we could say, council has considered the proposal by Central Kids and resolved to have staff negotiate with Central Kids on their expectations with.
It's probably not
I would say get more info before you go back to them on anything. Sorry, Bruce. I hear what you're saying.
Shall we just defer this? to
That's
Richard?
essentially what I'm saying
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I'm saying, let's let the staff come up with something.
Let's defer a decision.
Yeah.
I think the indication is that we're intent on them being able to stay there.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that is the intent, but I don't know that we've got clarity yet to make a firm decision around the process forward.
So I just have a question, because if it is the view of council that you would be willing to sell the property at an appropriate value determined transparently, met the necessary public prudence challenge, then the actual pressure to do that is taken off a little bit, because the lease still continues to 2035. But I think if that is something that you wanted, that you're prepared to do, and that you are prepared for that kindergarten to continue there, in other words, you're not going to go out to the market. You're actually going to, if that's what that's probably an important signal to them.
Yes.
That also probably gives us time to structure something like, it doesn't need to be 2 years. It could be 5 years. It just means we put in play an outcome that we're going to seek before the lease expires. You see what I'm saying? So if council's of a strong view, whether you feel that is a objective that we should be working to, I think that gives them a context and us a context to work towards. Because it's easy for us to actually just issue a renewal of the lease to it. Longer. That's really easy. But if your view is, well, actually, that's just delaying the decision until whatever date in the future, but you're prepared to work within that before the transfer of the property before 2035, then we can plan that through. We can plan that through and we can share that with them. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Okay, I've got a couple of lights on, Gary.
Firstly, I'll say I support the childcare centre having access to this best reserve for however long they want it for, because it adds value to our community.
It does.
But for me, it's a bit of a tangent to all of this discussion, is the notion of how we deal with surplus lands and what that framework and policy looks like, because I am aware of a number of blocks that are sitting with just rubbish on it, that are attachments to what used to be Māori land blocks. So it sits there as an eyesore, but not only that, unused, whereas I'm sure iwi could use that land. So I just want to, I guess, table the notion that how are we thinking about dealing with surplus lands?
So we've probably in the last 15 at least years, I would think, maybe longer, Mark, we've had various reviews of surplus land and how we could, and this is land that we don't need to use, exactly what you're describing there, Councillor. I think the reality we've found with a lot of these properties is actually disposing of them or transferring them is not straightforward. And we have previously looked at how we could self-fund that process to transfer the surplus land to other parties. This is just a sample of what we're dealing with. So I guess what I'm saying is it would be great to deal with all that surplus land. We would have to resource properly to do that, and it would take a lot of time. However, that's not saying we shouldn't do that. It's an important strategic decision and probably a good one we could put back up on for the next long-term plan. This is just the flavour of what we encounter with land that council owns, including satisfying any public work act, historic issues, etc., that just complicates it even further. But it's a good strategic goal, and I know previous councils have tried to achieve that objective as well. But we would need to resource it properly.
Because we had the benefit of that spreadsheet a couple of years ago.
Yes, that spreadsheet still exists.
So do we have a way forward, Peter?
Just the questions
So,
first.
yeah.
Regarding the possible proposed sale of this block of land, and my question is, if it goes to the closed tender process, my understanding is we offer to them at price X. Okay, understand that. Is there any way that somebody could object to that process? Can somebody object to a closed tender process and say, well, I want to put a bid in on that bit of land, which would complicate things for Central Kids, they may not end up with it anyway.
The key issue that we would need to make sure is that the disposal process that we go through meets all legal requirements and meets our policy requirements and meets that financial prudence test, which is why we get a valuation. Because that at least says you're not actually gifting it, you're setting up. So that exists with any property we sell. We have to make sure we achieve all of those steps. So that doesn't mean to say, by the way, that is a risk management thing. Somebody could still object to our process, to the court, not directly to us, but if we follow our process, that manages our risk of losing a challenge. I suspect in this instance, a property like this, where you've got a well-established educational, I think the risk of challenge is low. So
a lot of people wouldn't answer on a reserve. Dave.
So I think for me, the way forward would be reports received that council strongly signals to Morrisville Kids that there is no intention to kick them off the land now or into the long-term future. That 3, we don't have enough information in front of us right now to make a decision on whether we go to the long-term lease or look at property, as we need more information to look at that. And then maybe 4, something along the lines of the property be valued, and some of those discussions around how that might work out between Central Kids and council, might pan out a longer term with a time frame in mind around the 2035. So we're not taking a long-term lease off the table. We're not taking sailing of the land off the table, but we're indicating that in the short term, you're going to be there for a long time.
We could probably simplify that a little bit.
Well, look, we could have said, what I had put there originally, could have ended with staff, allowing the staff to negotiate an extension of the existing lease and possible future sale. And that covers all those things for them to,
I think, we just need to simplify it and it gives them certainty that the lease will continue, and we aren't going to make a decision today, we will consider.
It's a continuation of the current lease rather than extension, because they already have 10 years.
Continuation of the lease, because it's through to 2035 anyway. I think we need to understand the complexities of it a little bit better, and in the context of
Dane's explanation about we're not looking to.
they're allowed to be there.
That's because and we're going back and the staff are going back and saying
So what have we got
and getting a valuation before it so we can get more information.
So we've got at the moment the council's considered proposal and the relevant legislative requirements, potential use of land, impact the decision on communities. Why are we?
So that was the
Original?
Yeah.
No. I think we can just keep it simple and say your council has considered the proposal by Central Kids
and resolves
to
allow staff to negotiate
the continuation of the lease.
Continuation of the existing lease and possible future sale.
The continuation. And the potential of future sale. Probably.
So I still think it should be continuation bar extension on the existing lease, right? Because if they want that, if they go to 2035 and they say, well, can we have another 10 years on top of that? All right, that should be something that Mark can work.
Is that, but how specific do we need to be in this recommendation? Is my question.
Oh, I think we've got through you. Yeah, Adrian, I think we've got a pretty clear idea of what you want. You're prepared for them. You're not looking to take them off that property. They've got long-term tenure. What's going to work best in terms of achieving what they want to do, and we are entertaining the sale of the property in an appropriate way. We can have that conversation, and I think the thing that we appreciate is that we're not going to drop tools and don't do that now. We'll have a conversation, and then we'll work to achieve that outcome. We've got time to do it.
I think you should just say in there and or the potential future sale.
Yeah.
Because to say that you're getting continuation of the lease, that's the thing. So the potential future sale.
Yeah.
And you're not predicting it.
Do we need to be the specifics around the Reserve Act and everything?
No. I mean, we know what we need to do under the Reserves Act. We will eventually just seek some legal advice on one or two aspects in terms of the disposal, and get a valuation and get some more facts and figures.
I think that
if you're telling them in those negotiations about the difficulties of getting rid of the reserves and all that sort of thing, they may say, let's just sit with the lease.
Yeah, and then it's negotiate the lease. So I think that's a lot simpler and a lot clearer from a decision perspective than.
I wouldn't want to spend a lot of money on it. That's all.
Yeah. So I think that gives you clear direction. Right. Okay, you prepared to move that, Bruce? Seconded by Jane. I'm assuming there's no other discussion because the lights are all off. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We've now got, we'll just jump to item 7.6, the resource consent delegation. We've got Andrea with us this morning. Good morning, Andrea. Have you been in the?
No, I didn't have a chance to introduce Andrea Garcia from is our resource consenting leader, and you councillors may recall I talked about the delegations being transferred, and however, I'm not a planner, and Ali's had to go and attend a meeting on our behalf. Nathan's not available, and so I said, Andrea, you better come in because you know what this is about. Now, Andrea's joined us, I think, on the 6th of January, was it?
Yes.
Started from and came from the deep south.
The deep south from Invercargill.
I hope you're enjoying our climate.
Yeah.
In the winter, it's coming.
Maybe not this week, but
no, it's not too bad though.
So,
thank you.
So I'll let Andrea expand on this. The essence of this is, and as I've reported to council informally, people like me are signing off consents. And the effectiveness of me signing off consents with my lack of knowledge, questionable. People who know this are our people in the doing it, overviewing it, managing it. And so what we're saying is I certainly support 100% a more effective control by delegating it to the appropriate people. But sorry, Andrea, you might want to comment as well.
Thank you, Manaya. Thank you, Mr. Adrian and councillors. I am here, yes, on behalf of Ali and Nathan. We are proposing a change on the delegation manuals based on the delegations under Section 34 that the RMA allow us to have delegations under the for the resource consents process. So what we have identified is that at the moment our delegation manual allows the CEO and the manager for growth and regulations and the manager for operations to approve all the resource consents reports, and the planning manager to approve control and restricted discretionary activities. However, we have identified that even though the current managers are prepared and have the knowledge and experience to process those kind of reports, this is not the case, or it won't be the case in the future. So the people that it's like up to date with the technical knowledge and have like all the background dealing with these kind of processes every day are the planning manager and the team leader consents. So we are proposing to change the delegation manuals in that way. So our proposal is based that the planning manager would approve all the resource consents, and the team leader would approve the control and restricted discretionary activities. This will also allow the manager and the CEO to like focus on other tasks that would be more important for the district, and allow us to, like, the planning manager and the team leader to focus on like tasks like control and restricted discretionary activities that are not so strategic for the district but is still important. So yes, so the proposal is like the first option would be to keep the status quo, or the second option would be to approve the change on the delegation manual.
Yeah. Moved Sue, seconded Kevin, that the delegations of the RMA be updated to enable the planning manager to approve all resources.
Manaya is only going to be signed based on those people's.
Yeah.
recommendation.
I think it's a sensible delegation. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Nice to see you in here, Andrea.
Thank you.
Good excuse to bring you down and for everyone to meet you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you're enjoying working with
Yes.
the team.
I'm enjoying a lot. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. We'll now break for morning tea.
Are we off air?
We're only recording.
Which is still on.
So I've supplied Okay, we're now online recording again. So welcome back from our morning tea break. We'll now move on to item 7.7, which is the local authority shared services changes to the constitution up for approval. And we've got Niall here covering, but Charlotte written down here, so we've got Niall. Good morning, Niall.
Yes, you've got me today. Morning, everyone. This report is hopefully quite straightforward in seeking a change to the COLAB constitution. This is the entity that provides shared services to the shareholding councils within the region. Currently, COLAB's constitution does not allow for the chairperson to be reappointed for a further term. The constitution provides for a maximum term of 2 consecutive terms of 3 years each. So what they're wanting to do is simply just tweak the constitution, if I can put it that way, clause 13 of the constitution, to remove that requirement, which specifies that there is that maximum term. So that would allow the current chair, Peter Stubb, to continue in his role as a chair.
We're talking about all members, not specifically the chairperson.
Yeah, that's right. It would allow any board member to be reappointed, but the intention is for the chair, whose term is currently coming up for expiry. So that's what they're looking at. But yes, it would apply for all of the members of the board.
I'll move.
Move Sue, seconded Gary. No further discussion?
That's what they
want to get off.
Well, they've just set in that's just in the constitution that there's maximum of 2 terms. So they're just changing it. So that,
Obviously, they want to stay.
Stay on.
No, but why the maximum 2 terms?
Oh, yeah, I think that's kind of like a template that you see when this was originally set up, would be based on other models of constitutions, etc. And that's probably where it's come from, because I've seen this in another situation.
Oh, yeah.
That changed
The president of the United States is the same, but
Yeah.
I mean.
No, you're right.
But it's get to believe, so he's a process 3 years.
I guess the interesting thing would be to understand what is the narrative behind it that this has been changed, because COLAB's been in existence for a few years now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been I can't remember how long it's been an independent chair. I'm not sure if there's right at the beginning was independent. Can't remember. The rest of the board members are elected from or selected from the chief executives of the councils, that's council shareholders. So we've got Waipa, Hamilton, Waitongo, Hauraki, and Waka Regional, who are representing all of the chief executives on the board. And this is an independent chair. And the context is we're at a time where things have escalated in terms of COLAB as an entity, and he has been very, very, very good at leading and helping our.
I'm not averse to this at all. It just seems silly if you've got the right person in the job and they've come to the end of their 6 years, they would then go click.
Yeah, well, it's just a rule that was put in there in the constitution. So we've got the recommendation. I think we've got some clarity around Peter Stubb's performance and the leadership going forward. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
3 years, you change it to 9.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to now 8.1. We've got AJ and Lania here with the March financial report. Good morning. AJ hasn't been in the chamber. Yeah. Not often.
So RJ had Lania's just got back from an absence, and a well-deserved absence, and RJ had the challenge of producing the financial report, and I had the challenge of reviewing it. They haven't done it for a long time. Did a fantastic job, and it's that is the first time I believe that he's actually been presenting, but I believe he'll probably be presenting in the future as well.
Yes, I'll just introduce RJ Kumar's come from Far North District Council in a similar position. So joined as our management accountant. So chucked him in the deep end. I introduced him. I was here for a couple of weeks and then took off and left him for a month. So he's done a great job pulling this together. And I guess the idea of this financial report is that we want to make sure there's no surprises for you at the end of the year. So I was pleased when I read it when I got back this week that there was, it's really just I think all the things that we've highlighted before have continued, and there was nothing nothing new, but yeah, if you've got any questions, yeah, free to ask away.
Not questions, I suppose you could call it a surprisement. The cost to get a seismic assessment on this place of $71,000.
More than that.
Oh, is it?
That was only, but
Oh, please, I'm pleased with more.
I've previously reported to you that the cost of seismic assessments and the 71 would have been this financial year, but we've done work in previous financial years as well. It's a expensive business.
I hope they produce several volumes of report for that price.
So I want to talk about that because it sets me off about what happens with this kind of process.
And volumes don't always mean quality.
I could have done it for cheaper.
I could help them do it cheaper.
You were shaken by those figures, when you?
Okay, we'll just.
And just to clarify, the Morrinsville pools, what was painted for that price? I mean, that's
Pool.
the pool.
Is we paint a pool. We try and do one pool a year, on a cycle. So they only last about. If we get 4 years out of our paint jobs, we're doing well. So every year we're doing a different pool.
We were doing
Matamata was.
Well, we had to pick Matamata up for 2 reasons. One was some repairs. We painted obviously with the indoor pool with the rear, but there were some repairs to be done as well.
Kevin, remind me, thank goodness it's a millimetre short of what it should be.
It's done 49.99.
Okay.
I mean, it's a lot of money to paint a swimming pool, eh?
Well, pools, because they're a wet environment, right? The paint's got to stay.
You also have to take the old paint off, and put the new paint on.
It's yeah.
And there's never the right time to do it.
Has it got a nice golden colour? Got a golden colour to it?
Sorry.
Shut up, Peter. Okay.
It's all right.
Was that the two?
I think you've got your clarification there, Dave.
So a bit of a generalized question, I guess, more than anything specific, and this is obvious, then forgive me, but when you go down through the list of, where we're tracking, whether it's over or under with a lot of these items. So you always hear with budgets and things, oh, make sure you spend it all because if you don't, you lose it type thing. I'm just wondering, when you have items that go over by quite a bit, and then some of them are tracking under, is some of the money is the money that's under, is it spent because it's planned to be spent, or can you use some of that to offset some of the overrun? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's the target. It's like a target.
It's a target, and you're trying to spend a target, or can you reallocate things to try and offset stuff?
Absolutely right. If we are over somewhere else, we're looking for where can we cover that. We did this team played a crucial role in understanding that. Probably the most important thing is making sure we're getting the right information in the right place in terms of normal operations. I would be fair to say, and because RJ sent me the report, I jumped into April because I wanted to see how it's still going. So I made a prediction back in February. It's fair to say that there is this year has been surprising. When I say surprising, because remember we've had some big, deficits in previous years, and some areas are under that why we weren't expecting, and so understanding why that is. I don't think that's a decision necessarily by somebody deliberately underspending. I think there's things happening that we need to understand better for our budgeting. But certainly from our perspective, we don't send a message out to our budget managers that it's a target. It's about doing what we have to. So yes, that's why this monitoring process is so important.
Yeah, I guess what I was kind of thinking was, and that's great, and it's just good to hear, what the thinking is. Like the stormwater's running way under at the moment in Morrinsville was one of the things that sort of triggered for me, and I'm like, okay, well, I haven't seen any blowouts, nothing's fallen apart, nothing's gotten flooded, and we're over in other areas. Do we really need to do all that stormwater thing, or maybe we don't, and that can go somewhere else? But if you've got a project that's going and you know that that's coming, then that's fine. That money's got to be spent because you're doing a project. But it's like, what can be shuffled around depending on what. So it sounds like you do that, which is great.
So just on that one is a good example because we are under, and what can happen in stormwater is we can blow out with a few events in stormwater. Exactly. But the thing about that one is in next year's budget, we've increased the budget because we've got all these rain gardens and things that we have to, which are provide like stormwater, part of the stormwater infrastructure that we're having to maintain. So obviously what I'm interested in is, okay, where are we falling this year? Because we've increased so much next year. How's that going to play out? So it's there's a lot of reasons why we need to make sure our cost. It's just put our budgeting. You would know this. Go get our budgeting right.
Yes.
Because we're taxing people.
Yeah, and of course the other thing is if we're overspending, it's really, that's not good either.
No.
You know, and we fudging, you know, our numbers not being realistic. You know, it's so many factors go behind it, and it's hard. A budget. This is the challenge that council faces, right? As we do a budget, and that's what we rate on. We all know that budgets are just a budget. You know, like there's always going to be unders and overs when things happen. You know, unexpected events, weather events have put us under a bit of pressure the last couple of years, and that's where April will be an interesting one, because I think there were a lot of tree damage, a lot of signs, road signs. You know, there was a bit extra there. But the other good bit of news I've heard though is with the work that we've been doing in renewing water pipes, is there hasn't been the water leaks this year. So that's a positive. You know, like there's some good things where there's been some money spent and actually seeing the benefits in our operational spend. So yeah. So you've got another question?
Oh, look, this is just me again saying, you know, the pools and spas, are we heading in a better direction this at the moment? I know that the thing was that it was 604K over budgeted. Budgeting was incorrect, but you can't just go, well, that was an incorrect budget. Keep saying, is there anything that we're doing about it? And what are we trending in a better way? I can't see the numbers really.
So the big issue in the pools and spas was it was overly optimistic in the spa revenue, which we've addressed in the next annual plan. To your comment about the trends, the comment has been made to me by operations by Jenny, and I've looked at the numbers. We're running low in terms of utilisation for the spas, lower than we have in the past.
See, we haven't re-employed therapists.
Yes, and so that's a balancing act to try and make sure that costs and revenues are matched as much as possible. But I'm talking about not the domain beauty. I'm talking about the spa itself, which has been a goal. Dare I say it, has been a funder or a subsidises our pools, and there is a bit of a worry there that's down. And you know, this is typically a peak time for us. April, Easter is normally a trigger point. Now it's been warmer. Is that going to be moved out a bit?
Down how far? Can you remember?
Oh, look, I can't give you the exact numbers, but put it this way: it's the first time where I've seen we are not generating a healthy surplus to cross-subsidise the pools. That's the first time I've seen that for a long time.
Is it because we're not promoting? Is it the economy? I mean, that's what I mean. What I'm trying to say is, what are we doing to see if this thing can go a bit better? It's my point. We run a business. That is the one business we run. And I just don't want us to sit there and go, oh, things aren't good.
No.
I mean, when you run a business, you have to keep plugging away at how you're doing it.
And what are the opportunities to?
Yeah. Sorry. It's just and it's one that I look at all the time, and I understand, but you know, can't just walk away and go.
Yeah, because we don't want to be over optimistic is the challenge, and because it was like our metered water, because we've addressed that this year, so that's hopefully aligning better from our targeted rates perspective. Yeah, touch wood. Yeah, we're into the last quarter now, so that's good. Kevin.
Firstly, I spoke to Danny the other day, and he's absolutely wrapped. He's no longer here.
He would miss us greatly.
Secondly, how does the changing cash rate affect our interest rate swaps? Are we tracking nicely?
Well, our interest rate swaps are based on sort of longer term wholesale rates. So there's not always a direct sort of correlation there, but yeah, I mean, our interest rates are definitely better than what we'd budgeted for initially. So yeah, it's a positive.
I guess you don't want to have too much on swaps when the rates are falling. That's the key. You lock in swaps when the rates are going up, and more often than not, it's timing and luck whether you strike the right point in the journey.
The other key thing is to get our forecasts accurate. So it sort of comes down to being realistic with what we can actually achieve and how much we need to borrow, so that we can sort of plan. Our Treasury advisors help us plan ahead as to what we need to lock in for interest rate swaps and that sort of thing. So that's a something we're trying to get better at.
It's good to see you draw nothing down on that Westpac.
Yeah, the Westpac is just a credit facility that we have to have for liquidity purposes. Yeah, so we only use it sort of when we need to, cash flow purposes.
Peter,
Yeah, the graph on page 11, those pretty lines, pretty good explanation about the debt forecast, the black line, versus the policy maximum, the line below it. How do we sit with that if we have a larger debt than our policy says we can? How does that work?
what's understanding that graph, the interest rate risk profile.
Yeah, so we're trying to stay. Oh, not touch screen.
I mean, to me, it indicates we're borrowing more than our policy says we should.
Well, it's understanding this.
Yeah, no, so we're trying to operate, so we've sort of got a corridor, so we're trying to operate between the pink line and the yellow line.
Yep.
So at the moment, we're sort of that orange line in between.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so we are within our policy range.
Well, then what's the
Debt forecast.
debt forecast?
Oh, sorry.
So that's showing our debt, where it's going in terms of our long-term plan, isn't it?
Yeah.
And our borrowing.
It provides a correlation to the way that the other graph line follows, basically. So you would expect that your, if there's an aberration, in your debt or your interest rates, for example, interest rate risk profile, it might be because something's happened with the debt changing. So it's just an indicator, in my view, what you would expect to see with your interest rates risk profile. The overall, as you can appreciate, as your total debt changes, your interest rate could change as well. The exposure to your interest rate could change as well. So as Lani said, it's really those two, like yellow and mine. There's our operating margin that we're trying to stay in. I think it's there to give us a context.
PwC provided, so it's not like it's, it's externally provided, so that gives the surety that it's.
Perhaps I didn't explain it well. If you look at that yellow line, is it a yellow line on yours? Look at the shape of that curve, and then look at the debt forecast shape as well. Yeah, that's a context.
Does the net debt still below at this point in time? Rise over time. Capital works.
70% what can we go to?
175.
But we're well within.
Yeah, we're well within our debt ceiling, yeah. But I guess this is where the growing councils are struggling because their debt, their growth is driving spending, and that's where their debt ceilings are getting close to the ceiling. Anyway, it's something to watch. And I guess it's the old story if we talk about targets, and just highlighting what Dane mentioned is a great question, because just because you set an amount, let's think what you need. If you can do it less, or there's an opportunity that something comes up that you need to do more, that you can justify it, you've got the cushion there to do it.
It's an insurance.
Yeah, it's a balance, a bit of a balancing act. Like I said, budgets. A lot of people used to do them and put them in their bottom drawer. Council can't do that. Is there any further questions? Peter, would you be happy to move the?
It's not a question related
another one?
to an earlier item. The wastewater treatment plant at Matamata of $9 million extra. And of course, the interest on that's funded by ratepayers, and let's say 4% of $9 million at 4% is $360,000. I mean, does that affect the expected rate increases in years to come?
Yes,
it does. That's by about 1%, I suppose.
Half on the total spend, but more on the targeted rate.
I suppose the only good news about that is that interest rates are coming down rather than going up. So that's not encouraging.
Borrowing rates.
Better than it could be. All right. Yeah, I'll move that. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. So Peter moves that the March financial report be received. Have a seconder. Thanks, Kevin. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Again, anyone against? Quite Harry, I'm getting garbled. Right. Now move on to 8.2. Thank you, RJ, and I'll remember to pronounce your name correctly. My apologies for saying it incorrectly.
I don't mind either way, to be honest. Otherwise, you'd get the spelling wrong.
Yeah, true.
It doesn't bother me, or R doesn't bother me.
We're all used to our name spelled incorrectly.
Good to see you guys.
Cheers. Thank you. Right, and then the next item is your diary. Any questions?
I have once again gone through it with a fine tooth comb. And
You were
and ticked all the dates that you worked, Adrian, and I'm just a wee bit concerned that you're really not taking your statutory days off, is probably my more comment. Because you do, I was looking at this day after day after day. Well done. Congratulations.
It hasn't been too bad.
Well done.
Yeah, it's well, it's part of the role, right? It's not a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job, and I have gaps in times and things come on. But the reality is, people like to be present in their community, so it's a privilege to be a part of it. So,
great work.
There's the odd great typo grammar, but that's aside. I just wanted to mention actually, on the 28th of March, went to the Waikato District Police Awards. It was held at the Collegiate St Paul's Collegiate Chapel, and it was it's always such a positive event. You know, some people do some amazing things, because there's also the odd pavilion that gets recognised, or partner of, it's just there. So I've got a photo there with Ben. Many of you know from Matamata that Ben's Ben Miliwai is a Matamata. His father was a sport present teacher at the college, and obviously know his family. And he did get recognised for his work, and he does. He works in the mana whenua, the Māori space within the police, and does a very good job, and is quite a leader. So it was nice to catch up with him. Had a good catch up with Mike Henwood, our commander. Always good to have those relationships in place.
He's one of the trustees on the Water Trust Fund.
Right, good.
You don't see him that much, do you?
Don't see much.
Yeah, because they live in Hamilton. Yeah. But yeah, so it was nice. I don't take a lot of photos. I'm not a photo person. I tend to just go out and do the job, and so there's few and far between. The soil turning was quite good at the Tauhei Farms, because there were quite a few people there, and that's where Minister Watts, obviously as the Minister of Energy, he's also the Minister of Local Government, and Cambridge raised, so has a strong connection to our community. On that, I'll move that my report be accepted.
And I will second.
Thank you, Kayla. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, Harry. And then we've just got, we're starting bringing these minutes through from our external committees. I think it's important for transparency that you'll get to have them and reported in these meetings, so that you're aware of what's happening. So obviously in the Awahara Aerodrome Committee, Mufara has taken over as been appointed the co-chair. The Maharo Gillett resigned last year, so Bernard brings another perspective to the table. He works for Invercargill City Council, so he's very familiar with council processes.
He's on Maharo name change as well.
Yes. So if someone would like to, are we receiving? Yeah, we have to receive each one. Yep.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. That information we received. So move James, seconded Caleb. All those in favour, please say aye. Against carried. And then the next one down is we've got some other external minutes. The information we received. You'll see that the Waikato Plan Leadership Committee, I think that's gone. I don't know why we've got that sitting in that chart, to be honest.
That's what happened when we originally set it all up. We said we'll defer, but it's also hasn't really come back.
It's not, the committee is not the thing. So just thanks to Russell and James and Sarah Jane for being our council representatives at their respective groups. This will be a lot of interesting stuff. Yes, so if someone would like to move that the information be received. Moved Caleb, seconded Gary, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. I'm assuming there's no questions because nobody put their lights on. So that brings our meeting to a close. Thank you everyone for your engagement today. I think there's been some good robust discussion around some of our agenda items that we needed to flesh out and work through. So I'm going to declare the meeting closed. Thank you.